Okay, so you got two handouts today. You got assignment 105 and you got exercise 121. For the next, for exercise 121, 122, and 123, you're actually going to be working on your assignment 105s. But I have it scripted so that you do certain things on certain days. Like today, we're just dealing with the floor plan. Next class, we'll deal with the elevations. The goal of this assignment and this series of exercises is to get you familiar enough with AutoCAD such that you could actually draw a floor plan, get something productive out of it, to deal with how do you organize that floor plan onto some kind of a sheet and print it, and then also how do you make it look better than just a plain AutoCAD file. And that can be with line weights that are within AutoCAD, but we'll also bring it into Illustrator and do some tweaks to it, add a little texture to it as well at the end. For assignment 105, one of the things that I'm asking for is a 24 by 36 inch plot. This is the first semester that I've actually asked for it, but I've found that a lot of people manage to get through the digital tools classes and or 121 and they get to 220 and they've never plotted a thing. And I think it's important that you learn that and get that skill figured out. From everything that I understand and all the people that I've talked to, the paper will be provided for you, so you don't actually have to buy the paper, but you will actually have to do the print, and that's important. Do not wait until the morning before class to do the print, because everybody will be trying to print that day. Okay, so plan ahead. Don't print that morning before it's due. Print, a couple days before, over the weekend, on Friday the week before. Does that make sense? Right? Fair warning. Right? If it's not in my hand at 8, it's late. Okay? And normally I don't worry so much about the print version as long as it's posted online. Because this is such an important part of the assignment, I will need to have that print version in my hand for it to be on time. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. So we'll talk a little bit about the program, we'll talk a little bit about the site, and then we'll get into some AutoCAD techniques today. Today is a bit of a repeat of last class, only this time you get to do your own design work, but we'll add a little bit to it and add a little bit more detail to it. It should take you the full time today because those of you that are just learning AutoCAD, you might not have as much detail. Those of you that really know AutoCAD, you better add some detail. Okay? So let's talk a little bit about the assignment 105. It's going to be a cabin that's in Yosemite Valley. Anybody been to Yosemite before? Right? I pick Yosemite because it tends to be something that people have visited. It also tends to be something where there are a lot of pictures available online. So if you've never been there, you can see the pictures relatively easily and understand kind of what the site looks like. We have a kind of a preliminary program that's been established for you. You have a client, a husband and a wife with no children. They've requested the following for their cabin. Okay, 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom. A living space with a fireplace and windows that capture the site. It's a very open-ended statement. Right? A kitchen that's open to the living space of 150 square feet. A dining space of about 150 square feet. And you have a maximum square footage of 1,000. Okay, so this is not designed to be a gigantic house. It's designed to be a small cabin. Okay? If I was being really a stickler, I would cut that square footage in half and make you do it in 500 square feet. But I'm making it easy on you. You get 1,000. Okay? So part 2, we're going to deal with the evaluation of the site. And so I have some files that have been prepared for you so that you can see what the site looks like. If you go to the Digital Tools site and you go to Assignments and you go to Fall 2015, Assignment 105 is listed. And at the bottom of Assignment 105, there's a zip file of site information. So you want to download that file. It's a very small file. I'm going to show it, and then I want to extract it to my flash drive since I'm here. Okay, and so inside of that, there's 2 things. One says the building site, and it's a KMZ file, which is a Google Earth file. And then there's also an AutoCAD file. We'll open the AutoCAD file next, but let's start with the KMZ, the Google Earth file. So if you double click it, it will open up Google Earth. And it's going to drop us down into Yosemite Valley. Right? If we zoom out for a little bit more context here, right, Google Earth has improved quite a bit in terms of what you can see. It's pretty amazing. So this is Yosemite Valley down in here. The meadow that people commonly see pictures of is right here. Right? Camp Curry Village is down in here somewhere. Right? If you were eating. This is Half Dome, the iconic Half Dome. Anybody ever climbed Half Dome before? Oh, it's awesome. It's great. You won't be able to walk the next day, or maybe for 2 or 3 days, but it's fantastic. There's this great, sorry, this is completely unrelated, but I like to talk about unrelated things. There's this great set of cables that go up the side. Let's see if we can pull up a picture of them. See, this is the sheer rock cliff, and there's a set of cables that go right up the side of this. So you hike up to this little dome, and then you go up a set of cables right here, right, to the actual cliff top. It's really fun. Anyway, you can't be afraid of heights, though. So anyway, nothing to do with our site, but fun nonetheless. Our building site is down here in Happy Isles, right? I used to pick more over into the meadow over in here, but I wanted you guys to have a little bit of topography. So it's right down in here in Happy Isles. So we have a little bit of topography. It's relatively loose. It's about 1,000 square feet, or 1,000 by 1,000, right? 10,000 square feet, so that you can build and you have some flexibility. Note that the Merced River does come through this region right here. And if we swing the camera around like that, let's shift our view up if it's going to let me. Right, our view is across. Oops. Sorry. Our view is kind of across the valley, so you see these mountains on the other side here. Right? And so you can kind of get a sense for what's going on. So I would encourage you to spend some time in Google Earth and play with these views so that you can actually get a better sense of what the surrounding land looks like and what this valley looks like. Right? I'm swinging down here, looking at our building site. Right? There's the Merced River coming through. Right? Our building site is roughly in this vicinity, right in there. Okay? If I jump over to my flash drive, which I thought was open, I did also include a basic topography of the site. I'm going to go ahead and double click on this topography file. And because it was actually created in Rhino, the way I sliced it up, you have to click this continue opening DWG file. All right, so AutoCAD's loaded. So this is a set of contours that represent your building site. They're 1 foot intervals, so every 1 foot going up the site. So it's not a particularly steep site until you get over to this side, which is obviously quite steep. This swale right here is where the Merced River flows through, right, on your site. A lot of you will probably build in this relatively flat area here. Okay? So I've included this, and I would encourage you to open this file and start your drawing on top of this file because it'll give you a sense of what the site looks like. Generally, this would be common if you were doing a design project to represent this. I should also point out that this is not a one-shot thing. We're going to do the plans and the elevations first, and then we're going to go into SketchUp and we're going to build it as assignment 106. And we'll build it in 3D and we'll do some collaging. So if you find at the end of this that you really don't like your cabin and you want to change it for 106, that's totally fine. But the program is going to stay consistent for 105 and 106. Okay? So this is my overall site. And so if I go ahead and pick the polyline tool, I can start drawing whatever the building is that I want. Okay? And so let's say that, let me turn on ortho here. And for lack of something better, I'm going to draw essentially the same floor plan that I drew last time. So I'll say 24 feet. Oops. I thought the units were already set. Let me double check. Oh, that's a mistake on my part. The units were supposed to already be set. All right. So let me go 24 feet by 12 feet. And somehow these units seem off. I'm going to have to double check the units on this topography. 12 feet. Just check one thing real fast. Yeah, the units are correct. So it gives you a sense. This is obviously smaller than your building, but you can see how small your building is in comparison, right? So this is much bigger site context than you need. Okay, so let me go ahead and continue with this. I'm going to offset with 6 inches there, and I'm going to continue drawing out my floor plan. Now, one of the things that I suggested for this exercise is that you spend time actually trying to really draw out the stuff that's on the floor plan, the things that make up the interior of your building. If you flip your sheet over, right? This is, again, sample floor plan, not complete. This would not work for the program. There's not enough bedrooms or room or square footage or anything. Okay? But it does give you a sense of what proper line weights would be and what kind of the detail that I'd be looking for. So I have here, I have flooring. I have some tile flooring in the kitchen. I have drawn in kitchen cabinets, a sink, a stove, right, that kind of information, as well as the windows, right? So if I were going to go ahead and draw in, for example, the kitchen in this area here, right, I'd start with the kitchen cabinets. So the kitchen cabinets in this section would be 24 inches from the wall. So let me just go ahead and do an offset at 24 inches from the wall, something like that. I don't need all of this, so let me go up here, I don't know, maybe 6 feet. And do I carry the CAD? I carry this all the way across there. Now, I need to get rid of some of this, so I'm going to trim. So I'll type trim, or go to modify and then trim. I'll select these objects. I'll hit enter, and then I'll get rid of this part of the object and that part of the object. There. And then I can actually delete this piece. So I drew in that little L-shaped kitchen. We'll call it that. And now I need some content. And this is one of the things that I want to make sure that I show you, is that in the world of AutoCAD, there's a lot of content that's already been created by other people. And if you were in Studio, maybe you'd be asked to draw everything by hand. And certainly, as you get more and more proficient in the world of AutoCAD, it would be very easy to just draw a stove or draw a refrigerator or whatever. But a lot of times you want to be able to plug in objects. Like if you're doing a bathroom and you wanted to plug in a toilet or something like that. It's hard to draw a toilet. It would be nice to have objects. So we have two different options. If we go to the Insert ribbon right here, so next to Home there's Insert, right? We can insert something called a block. And a block is a drawing that's already been created that is then referenced and stuck into our drawing. So it's like a small drawing that's stuck into our drawing. Okay? This insert works if you went online and you searched for AutoCAD Blocks. So if we look, for example, to AutoCAD Blocks, right? There's a bunch of sites that are out here, right? I'm not saying any one of them is better than another, right? Here's furniture CAD blocks. So we'll look at this, right? Sofa plans, right? Armchairs, right? There's regular chairs, right? You can kind of see here's dining room sets. Okay, let's pick this for right now. Tables and chairs, right? And again, I haven't actually downloaded this, so figure out where I'm supposed to download it. Download CAD Blocks. There it is. Okay, it comes as a zip file. Let me go ahead and show in the folder. And let me extract all to my flash drive. And just to keep things organized, I'm putting them in their own folder inside of my exercise 121. Right? And we'll go ahead and extract those. It'll copy the items. And there it is as an AutoCAD file. So if I go back to AutoCAD, right, and I come in here and I go to Insert, right, it's going to bring up this little Insert dialog box. By the way, this is all written up on the website here. If you go to Tutorials, AutoCAD, right, I have to add it to the menu structure, so just click on AutoCAD for right now. And you'll see there's Blocks 9.8. And so everything that I'm doing, it'll walk you through right here. So I'll go ahead and I'll click on the Browse button. And I'll browse to that file that I just downloaded here. Right? And I'll go ahead and say Open. And I have some special options here. One, insertion point, specify on screen. If I uncheck this, I would have to type in a value in X, Y, and Z of where this block would go. Specify on screen is always the easiest solution. Right? If I needed to scale the object, I could choose to either specify on screen or type in a scale value. And if I needed to rotate the object, I could do it here as well. I'm going to go ahead and say OK. And I'll specify an insertion point of right here. And of course, the scale is way off. Right? What else is new? But there is the file that I brought in. There are the tables. Okay? It comes in as a big group like this, so I'm going to go ahead and explode it such that I could come in and I could select an individual table and chairs. So let's say it's this set. Right? Let me go ahead and move this. Turn off ortho here for a second. Again, way too big. So let me scale. And we'll say that that is maybe 48 inches, something like that. Right, maybe it's a little smaller than that. But the point is, then I can drop it into, that is definitely not correct scale. Clearly, I'm doing a terrible job here. There we go. And then I could place this, say, as part of my kitchen there as a table. Okay? Now, in reality, the blocks that come in, kind of like this one, aren't always the right scale, and there's issues with them because somebody else drew them. Built into AutoCAD is also a set of blocks, not as dramatic of a set of choices, but built into AutoCAD is a set of blocks that you can choose to use that are in what is called the Design Center. And so this is written up under 9.9 Design Center. That'll let you follow through here. And if I have the Insert ribbon open, if I come all the way on the right here, there's a button for Design Center. And I can go ahead and click on the Design Center button. Okay. When this first comes up for the first time, I have to go through a couple folders, which again is written up. I'm going to start with the en-us folder, and then I'm going to go into the Design Center folder. Right? And now I'm going to be presented with a bunch of options, right, of content. These are like collections of content. The most common ones that you're going to use are the Home Space Planner, the House Designer, and the Kitchens, in all likelihood. Because I've been dealing with the kitchen right now, I'm going to go ahead and pick the kitchen. So I'll double-click on Kitchens, and then I'll double-click on Blocks. And we see that there's a bunch of blocks that have been set up for me that I can use. Right? Here's a refrigerator, 36-inch. Right? Let's go ahead and drop that in. So I'll double-click on the refrigerator, and it'll bring up the same insert box that was normal with blocks. And I'll go ahead and say OK, specify on screen. And it'll come in. Let me go ahead and close this for a second. And it'll come in, and there's my 36-inch refrigerator. Right? It's facing the wrong direction, so I'll go ahead and click it in place, and I'll use the Rotate command. Again, it's under Modify and then Rotate, or you can type Rotate. And let me turn on Ortho. There it is. And let me go ahead and use the Move command, which you haven't used just yet, which is under Modify and then Move. maybe. There it is, move. It's going to ask me for a base point, so the point I want to move from, which would be right here, to the point I want to move to, which is right there. And then I can adjust this line by grabbing this little handle and pushing it over there. So now I have a refrigerator that's been put into this side. Okay, let's say I wanted a stove. I can go back to the Design Center and look for a range. All right, I'll double click and I'll say OK. And I can now drop that into place. Close this. Again, I have to rotate. Right now, I should point out that I could do this rotation ahead of time. So if I went to the Design Center, I double clicked on the stove. Right here, I could either specify on screen or I could go ahead and type 90 because I know it needs to rotate 90. Say OK. And now when I go to put it in, it will have been rotated by 90. Right? So let's say that I want this to be down a little bit further. Let's move. And we'll put it there on the corner. And then I'm going to select it again, type move. And we'll go maybe this way by 18 inches. Something like that. Okay? And so now I end up with the stove that's there. Okay? Now, I will say this is not exactly the most attractive stove in the world. Okay? But it's what's built into AutoCAD. If you were unhappy with it, I would go back online and search for, right, under CAD Blocks. Right? I'd probably go to AutoCAD Blocks, and let's do a wolf range. See what we can find. Right? Here's a much nicer looking wolf range. Right? It looks like I might have to be a member to download this. This is always the risk with these sites. I'll keep looking around and see if I can find another set. Sometimes manufacturers, this is a Thermador range. Right? You might be able to get it straight from the manufacturer. Right? CAD file DWG format. And it's going to download. Let me go ahead and show in the folder, and I'm going to copy this file to my flash drive. And I'm just showing you this because sometimes you have something specific that you want to be able to put in your scene. So let me go ahead and click on Insert again. Go to Browse, and I'm going to pick that fancy range. Certainly more detail. It's actually a 3D object. And let me rotate it. That, yeah. And then I can move this into place. All right. So definitely different looking, but you've got options. Okay? And maybe that one's too ugly, or I don't like it. Again, I'm doing this on the fly, so I don't necessarily like everything. Okay, so we have that. We're starting with the basics of block. The other thing that I want to talk to you about today is using hatches. And so I need to draw a few more polylines to separate these rooms here. All right, let me use trim. And I'm going to select these here. Need to draw a door. Offset by 36 inches. And then we'll do trim again. There. Now, by the way, in the Design Center, if I went back to Blocks, there are doors. Go back. I think it's under House Designer, Blocks, door, left and right 36. We'll do a left door 36. Go ahead and say OK. There's my door. It's not in the correct rotation, so I need to rotate it. Like that. And now I have a door. This is not how I personally draw doors. I don't like the look of this door, but the point is you can use these as pre-made objects. Okay? So I have that in place. Now I want to add a little bit of texture for the floor itself. And so we're going to use something called a hatch pattern. And AutoCAD will fill in regions, contained objects, with something called a hatch. And if you remember back to your 130 days, you may have had to do hatching where you cut through something, right? Which basically means it's a series of lines that fill in what has been cut through in an object. And so if we go and type hatch, or let me go back to home here, I think it's under draw hatch, or just type hatch, right? By the way, as a complete side note, the old command was bhatch. They superseded that with just regular hatch. It doesn't matter whether you type bhatch or hatch. For me, because I learned AutoCAD long before it was even, it was all command line based when I learned it, bhatch is like stuck in my head permanently. So while I'm teaching, I may type bhatch instead of hatch. You don't have to. You can just type hatch. But I like to warn people ahead of time. It's just old habits die hard. Okay? So when I have hatch, the hatch creation ribbon shows up. It's not available as a choice regularly. So if I didn't have the command, you can see that hatch creation isn't up here as a tab. But when I type hatch, right, it shows up here in this ribbon as its own tab. Okay? So I have some options. Under boundaries, I have the ability to pick points. And what pick points does is it says, here's an internal point, analyze and find as if I were going to fill it in. Okay? Select says, let me select all the objects that make up the border of what I want to fill in. Okay? So there's just two different ways of doing this. Mostly, you're going to use pick points, which is the default. And when you click on pick points, it says pick internal point. So you see that I move my mouse over this as an internal point, and it highlights. Right? Likewise, if I move my mouse over this point, that highlights. And if I move my mouse over this point, that highlights. Okay? I'm having a bit of an issue, though, right here, because it's actually filling in part of the wall, which I don't want it to. Right? So sometimes you have to be a little bit careful with how you're filling it in. So I have some options. I could fill in the walls, for example. I could fill in the floors. Right? Either way. So I'm going to pick the bedroom for right now as an example piece. Right? And I'll go ahead and I'll click. And then I'll also click here so that it's filled in the bedroom floor. If I zoom in on this, now it's not going to show up on the projector. The hatch pattern that I have is this diagonal set of lines. Okay, so if we look here under patterns, right, I can actually expand the patterns and I could pick a variety of patterns. Let's say that I wanted to pick, I could pick brick, for example, and it would look like brick. Right? There's concrete pattern for concrete. Right? And we could continue down here, and there's a bunch of other patterns depending on what you wanted. Okay? I'm going to go back up to that basic line pattern. This is one that I actually use a fair amount, but it's showing up as just a solid object. So I need to adjust the scale. So if I look over here under Properties, this lower option here is something called Scale. And there isn't really a science to this. You just have to try some values. So I usually go in increments of 10. To see what happens. So I'll start with 10, and we'll see, okay, it turned out a little bit better. We can now see that there's a bunch of parallel lines, right? Maybe 15, not quite, a little more, maybe 20 will get me to approximately what a floor width would be, 25, something like that. Yeah, that looks about right. Okay. The other thing that I have is I have something for angle. So right now the hatch is at 45 degrees. Diagonally. If I wanted this to mimic what floor would look like, right, I'd want to adjust it. So we'll add 45 degrees. So I type 45 in there, and now it's going vertically like a set of floor. Okay? So I'm doing that to create a really easy hatch pattern. Right? I can continue, and I can actually add a hatch in that room. Right? So now all of my floor looks like that kind of basic wood pattern. Okay? If I didn't like the hatch, I can click on the hatch. It will open back up the hatch editor, and I can change the properties. Right? So I could change the hatch, for example. So you can see that one is a series of parallel lines. That one has lines that are closer together and wider apart. Something like that. So I have a lot of flexibility, and I can change these in any way after the fact. If I don't like my angle being at 45, I could go to 135, and that would make it go horizontally instead of vertically. So you can play around with this a lot. Okay? One of the things I recommend with this, right, is that it ends up being a much lighter color, so that you don't overpower your drawing. Okay? And so if I were to select the hatch, for example, and I click on the home ribbon, I can come back and adjust the line weights. And the line weights are available here under the Properties menu. Right? And by default, it says by layer, by layer, by layer. And each layer that you have is associated with a particular line weight and line type, and color, for that matter. But you can manually adjust the objects. Okay? So if I wanted the floors, right, if we look at the back here, I'm saying the flooring is a 0.00 millimeter, and the color is 251. So if I look at my thickness, my line weight, instead of by layer, I can make it 0.00. And then under color, right here, I want color 251. And so let me go ahead and click on More Colors, and 251 is right here, this kind of grayish color. And I'll go ahead and say OK. And if I deselect it, you can see that it's a lighter gray color than the dark color. And that helps it just kind of blend into the background so that you have a depth of detail when you look at it this close, right? But if you hold it further away, you don't necessarily see those lines. And that's one of the advantages of using line weights. Okay? Now maybe I want to add line weights to my walls. Right? I can select the walls and again come over here to add line weights. And maybe, what did I suggest here? 0.40. So we'll come down here to 0.40, and those are now there. Okay? Now, line weights don't show by default in AutoCAD. If you want to show them, you have to turn them on. And so if I come down here into this little bottom tray, and I click on the customization icon, bottom right corner, I can elect to check the box for line weight, which then displays the line weight tool. So this isn't actually turning it on, it just displays the button for it. And then I can click on it and turn it on, and we'll see the line weight show up as thicker. Okay? So if I wanted the rest of the walls to also have that line weight, I can go through and I can select the walls, and I can up that to 0.40, and I'll have a much thicker set of lines that represent the walls themselves. Right? Obviously, I haven't done this set yet, so I probably should do that. Okay. So you certainly can go through and apply line weights to individual lines, but sometimes it is better to apply things to a layer, and it's certainly easier to apply them to a layer. Right? So let's talk about the layer properties here for a second. So again, I'm on the home ribbon, and in kind of the center here, I have a section called Layers. Okay? And inside the Layers section, I have a big button for Layer Properties, and I also have a drop-down menu that shows the various layers that I have in use. Okay? I'm going to go ahead and click on the Layer Properties button. And when I click on the Layer Properties button, I get the Layer Properties Manager popping up. And so right now I have Layer 0. I have a layer called Topography. I have a layer called 3D Type 72, and a layer www.cadblocks.net. Okay? These two layers, the 3D and the CAD blocks, came from the blocks that I brought in. Those are the layers that they had. Okay? I'm going to go ahead and create a new layer for myself, and I'm going to do it by clicking on this New Layer button. Right? And when I click on the New Layer button, I could also press Alt-N to do this. Right? It's going to create a new layer. It's called Layer 1. I'm going to rename that layer to be Walls. Right? And I should also mention that there are specific naming conventions for how you name your layers, etc. It's not something that I'm going to teach in this class because I think it's a little bit beyond the scope and it's a little too technical for how you structure your layers. For what we're doing, we're going to do basic plain English names, right? So the walls are going to be on a walls layer, right? The furniture is going to be on a furniture layer, okay? So I have walls, and if we come over here, I have some options. I can turn the layer on and off. I can freeze or thaw the layer. I can lock the layer, which means I can't edit it, but I can see it. Then I have a color for the layer. I have a line type for the layer, and I have a line weight for the layer. I have a transparency, right? I can choose whether or not it prints, and this viewport, we'll talk about what that means in 2 classes from now. Okay? So let me go ahead and adjust a few things. I said this was the walls layer, and I said the walls should have a line weight of 0.40. So I'll go ahead and say OK. So that means everything that's on that layer is going to have a line weight of 0.40. Okay? I can continue and I can create another layer, and we'll call this kitchen. Okay? And we'll make the default line weight for the kitchen 0.18. So I'm going to click on the line weight here and change it to 0.18, and I'll say OK. Right? Again, the color is going to stay white. And I'm going to add one more layer, and we'll call this layer flooring. And again, you could add as many layers as you want. The flooring default should be at 00. But remember, the flooring had a color of 251. So I'm going to click where it says white here, and I'm going to pick 251 as the color. And I'll go ahead and say OK. Okay, so I'm establishing these in the layers rather than as individual objects. Okay? So now I need to go back to my drawing, and I need to make certain things appear on certain layers. So let's start with the flooring, for example. If I click on the flooring, right, I have to click back on home here so that I can see this layer properties. With an object selected, this drop down here will say what layer it's currently on. So right now it's on the topography layer, which is not the layer I want it on. So I'm going to click on the topography, and it brings up this little drop down. And if I change to flooring, right, the object is now going to be on the flooring layer. Okay, so let me deselect flooring. I hit escape to do that. And let me select the walls. All right, so I have the wall selected now. Okay, I'm going to change the wall layer by clicking on this little drop down and clicking on walls. Right? So now those are on the walls. To help illustrate this point of the advantage of using layers, if I click on layer properties and I go to the walls layer here and I change the color from white to say red, right? When I say OK, everything that's on that walls layer is going to turn red. Does that make sense? So it's much easier to adjust properties if it's assigned by layer than by individual object, right? So it's generally a big advantage to work with your layers and assign things by layer. So let me go ahead and go back, and I'll change it from red to white. It's also very common practice for people to assign layers colors as they're initially drawing. So the walls layer might be red, the furniture layer might be green, and then only when they get to the phase of making the production drawings, the things that are going to go print, do they change the colors away from the bright colors. Okay? So I now have worked through my layers. I have layers assigned. I've started to work through my floor plan. Again, I have this greater topography so I can see where this building is going to go in the grander scheme of things. Your building is going to be much bigger than this building with a little bit more square footage. I should probably use this object to trim the topography. Where it intersects the building like that. Okay? And then I would keep drawing and draw the rest of my building. Okay? So today I want you to work on the floor plan. I want you to pay attention to your layers. I want you to add some line weights as you go through. so walls should be thick. That's why this is on the back. If you don't finish all the line weights, not a big deal, right? But it's certainly a start, certainly something to be aware of. And I want you to try to bring in some objects. So think about furniture, stove, refrigerator. You know, you probably need to do a bathroom, right? So again, if I was doing the bathroom, I go to Insert, Design Center, and I'm in the Home Designer. There's a toilet view, top view, right? I can drop the toilet into the scene here, right? Perhaps there's there's a sink, right? I can put the sink in. You get the idea. Okay, so I'm trying to put these objects in to make my building realistic. All right. So we'll talk through a little bit more of line weights and kind of really customizing your drawing. You should try before next class to have the floor plan done so that we can concentrate on what the elevations of each side look like. Okay, because we're going to move on to elevations next class. Are there any questions about all of this? Yeah. The Design Center, if they're coming from Autodesk, which in this case they are, they will be scaled correctly. So you don't have to worry about scaling. If you bring in an object from an online source, you run the risk that they're not scaled correctly. And you just have to pay attention on, does that look reasonable? If the chair that you brought in or the couch is 20 feet long, it's not reasonable. There is the ability to measure, right? Under the home ribbon, there's a button for measure. So if you were to bring in a block that you didn't know what the scale was, you can click on the measure tool and measure it to see, does that seem realistic, right? And so you just have to be aware as those come in. There's a variety of sites out there. CBEN.net used to be a really good one. I don't even know if it's still in operation anyway. Yeah, it looks like it's down right now. But if you do, AutoCAD Blocks, you're going to find a variety of sites that are out there that provide a bunch of, here's top 10 free AutoCAD block websites. So they're here they're probably talking about which of these are good choices. I think First in Architecture actually has some pretty good CAD blocks themselves. So here's beds, for example. All right, let's see if we can download beds. You always have to pay attention to where. Imperial, download now. And let me go ahead and extract this. All right, so we'll try these now and see. Again, insert. Come on, AutoCAD. And we go to Browse, and here's the furniture blocks. Yeah, those look like the right scale. So I have beds, for example, different size beds. It comes in as one big block. If I type explode, I'll get individual blocks that I can work with. Okay, and so I could pick, for example, this little bed with a little lamp next to it, and we can move it over into the bedroom. I can erase this one, and you get the idea. Okay, so I think these are good examples. It looks like there's some closets that you could use, etc. And you're going to place those objects inside of your building to try to add a certain sense of realism. So nothing wrong, certainly in this class, with using these blocks so that you can populate your drawings. Okay? We'll talk about a little bit later on how do you make these look good down the road, right? But for now, we're just going to drop them in. Okay? Any other questions? No? Good.